Okay, so this is factor analysis week in week 8 in personnel in 520. And the background is you have a 28 item measure and you are analyzing it to see what the factor structure is underneath. So I open up the data set Williams.save, and we're going to do first a principal components method, and we're not going to rotate at this step but generate a scree plot. So I'm going to go to dimension reduction, factor. I'm going to move all 28 items over. I'm going to make sure this is item 1. Make sure this is item 28 or 30. Okay. So I'm going to change this to 0 like the instructions say. I'm going to ask for the scree plot. I'm going to use principal components. I am not going to use a rotation method. And I'm going to say OK. Okay. And just looking at extraction, it looks like I have 5 factors with an eigenvalue over 1. I have 4 with a percent of variance of 5 or greater. 1, 2, 3, 4. And to get to 70, it looks like I would need 9, which is a lot. Let's look at the scree plot. The scree plot seems to have an elbow here that would indicate 3 if you include the elbow. And remember, this is not going to be interpretable because it has not been rotated yet. And so we're making a decision based on this, and because the scree plot says 3 and percent of variance says 4, and eigenvalue says 5, and the cumulative percent of variance suggests almost 9, I think it would be safe to go with 4. And so I'm going to rerun this with 4 factors. Where did my... Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to go back in and look at extraction. And I'm going to say 4 factors. And for rotation, I'm going to use Varimax. And I want to make sure under my options that I have sort by size. Then I'm going to hit OK. So here, after it's rotated, I meet all of the criteria, although I probably could have had 5. But most importantly, I'm going to look at the meaning of the items in the rotated component matrix. So first here, these down to disorganized people annoy me. That's your first factor, and your second factor starts with I get most things done in a day that I want to. Okay, so for the first factor, it's organized. This should be negative. Organized. This is all having to do with being organized. So the second factor, starting here, looks to be about planning. Okay. And then this third factor has to do with frustrations and interruptions and planning. Again, and you can see this item highly loads on the first factor, which is no surprise there. And same with this one. Okay, so your third factor is from here to here. And your last factor is spontaneity, uncertainty, doesn't like schedules, feeling relaxed. And these are all the same. So I feel like this loaded really well. There's a couple of items that the way they're worded, of course, are going to load on to two factors, planning and what happens when your plan gets interrupted. So part of that is natural, and part of it you may want to think about how you write them. Here's another couple of items that have really strong cross-loadings. And either you may want to remove these if you have enough items and you have a reliable enough subscale, or rewrite them. But these also, the way they're worded, have a great deal to do with each other. Here's another strong cross-loading. Here's another one. So these dimensions are very related, which makes me question whether I should have done direct Ableman rotation, because these do seem to be related. So I'm going to do that really quick and see what that looks like. So I'm going to keep everything the same, and I'm just going to change it to direct Ableman. Okay, and there's a note here: when components are correlated, sum of squared loadings cannot be added to obtain total variance, because it would be doubling the variance being counted. But everything's going to look the same except here, and I want to see if there's a difference here. Disorganized, disorganized, organized, organized, file, organize, prioritize. To do, the first factor appears to be the same. Okay, frustration, interruption, having a plan still highly loads. These appear, it appears to be very, very similar to the prior structure. And typically with direct ablemen, it's a bit more difficult to interpret because it is correlated, but it seems like those correlations really came through on the Varimax rotation anyway. Let's see. This does seem to have switched up a bit here. The relax, the spontaneity, scheduling. It moved to factor 3. This doesn't seem to be too different, so I'd probably go with the Varimax structure. Although I would question why this data set doesn't have the negative factor loadings that it should. It seems like some reverse scoring was not done on the items. And I would note that in your output. So when you write this up, you would go pull your template for factor analysis from week 13. And you're going to talk about how many factors you chose. And you did it a bit differently this time because you looked at it before it was rotated. But you may not have chosen what I chose, and you may come up with something different. But typically, you probably would have come up with 3 to 5, probably 4 or 5. 4 seems to have a really good meaning, but you can also check by running 5 factors and seeing if that doesn't get rid of some of the problematic items into another factor. But you want to talk about the 5 criteria that you used to determine the number of factors, which would be eigenvalues over 1, which is this right here. And actually, you would use the rotated one. So there's 4 here. Your second criteria is the percent of variance, and these are all over 5. Your third criteria is that you're hoping to achieve 70%, which you didn't. So you can just note that. It may suggest more factors. Your scree plot, here's where I would say the break is 3, including the elbow. So that's your fourth criteria. And your fifth criteria is the meaning and how well does the meaning lay out. And I think it lays out pretty well. Again, you've got about 4 or 5 problematic items. Remember, in your report, you want to include your items, not the item number, the text. You want to name the factor in your factor loading chart. You want to have all the numbers here. And I think it's helpful to highlight which goes with which factor. And then in your recommendations, talk about any problematic items. And so you will have a scree plot and a factor loading chart for this homework. Any questions? Okay, this concludes this recording.